Chronicles of Ancient War, the 300 of Sparta. How 300 Spartans destroyed 150,000 Persian invaders. History's greatest last stand. History's greatest battles often hinge not on the size of armies, but on the strength of human will. In August 480 BC, as summer storms gathered over the Aegean Sea, 300 Spartan warriors faced a choice that would echo through millennia: surrender to Xerxes' invasion force of 150,000 or stand their ground against impossible odds. The Persian Empire, stretching from India to Egypt, had never failed to conquer a nation it set its sights upon. Yet at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a handful of warriors would challenge the most powerful military force the ancient world had ever seen. As Persian ships darkened the horizon like a moving forest, King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans prepared for what seemed certain death. What unfolded over the next 3 days would become one of history's most extraordinary military engagements, a battle that would shake the foundations of the mighty Persian Empire and forever alter the course of Western civilization. The shadow of Persia. By 480 BC, Xerxes had transformed the Persian Empire into the most formidable military force in human history. From his opulent palace in Persepolis, the King of Kings ruled over lands stretching from the Indus River to the Mediterranean Sea. Yet one prize continued to elude his grasp: the fractious city-states of Greece, gleaming like scattered jewels across the Aegean. The great king, who had witnessed his father Darius humbled at Marathon 10 years prior, could not tolerate this insult to Persian supremacy. The defeat still burned in the imperial court. A mere 10,000 Greeks had shattered the myth of Persian invincibility. Xerxes spent 4 years preparing his revenge, transforming it into the largest military expedition ever assembled in the ancient world. The first whispers of invasion reached Greece through merchant ships in 481 BC, carrying tales of vast shipyards along the Phoenician coast where over 1,200 warships were under construction. Persian engineers had developed a pontoon bridge spanning the Hellespont, an engineering marvel that would allow Xerxes' army to march directly from Asia into Europe. More terrifying still, they brought the feared Immortals, an elite force of 10,000 warriors who fought with such ferocity that their casualties were immediately replaced, giving the impression of an undying army. To command this massive force, Xerxes appointed the brilliant General Mardonius, a veteran of the Ionian campaigns. The invasion force would carry multinational contingents: Persian heavy cavalry, Median archers, Egyptian marines, and Phoenician naval specialists. Each group brought their own fighting styles and weapons, creating a combined arms force unlike anything Greece had ever faced. The Persian preparations were meticulous. Xerxes' cartographers had already mapped the approaches to Greece's northern borders, identifying Thermopylae as the critical choke point, a narrow coastal pass where the Greek forces would likely make their stand. Supply depots were established along the invasion route, and advanced scouts had infiltrated Greek territories, reporting on the bitter rivalries between city-states that might be exploited. In the spring of 480 BC, Xerxes dispatched his final ultimatum to the Greek city-states: submit and retain autonomy under Persian protection or face annihilation. Athens responded by executing the Persian envoys, a deliberate act of war that sealed the coming conflict. Sparta, bound by religious festivals, seemed paralyzed by indecision. The great king, who had never known defeat, began to move his pieces into position. The invasion that would shake the foundations of Western civilization was about to begin. Yet even as Xerxes' shadow lengthened across the Aegean, he failed to account for one crucial factor: the unique warrior culture of Sparta, where men were bred for battle from birth and knew only one law: return with your shield or on it. The Spartan way. While Persian warriors learned to fight in the service of their king, Spartans were forged into weapons from the moment of birth. In the agoge, Sparta's brutal military education system, boys were taken from their mothers at age 7 and subjected to 15 years of systematic hardening. They learned to endure pain, hunger, and cold without complaint. They were taught that individual survival meant nothing. Only the phalanx mattered. The 300 warriors selected for Thermopylae represented the pinnacle of this system. Each was a homoioi, a Spartan peer, who had survived the agoge and proven himself in battle. More significantly, each had living sons to carry on his bloodline. This was no suicide mission in their eyes, but a calculated strategic decision. They understood the mathematics of the pass. In the narrow confines of the hot gates, Persian numbers would mean nothing. Their training had prepared them specifically for the type of warfare they would face at Thermopylae. Spartan phalanx tactics emphasized disciplined formations where shields overlapped to create an impenetrable wall of bronze. Their primary weapon was the dory, an 8-foot spear designed for thrusting in tight formations. When the dory broke, they switched to the xiphos, a short sword optimized for close-quarters stabbing. Every movement was drilled until it became muscle memory. The geography of Thermopylae itself shaped Leonidas's strategy. The pass was barely wide enough for a single wagon, perhaps 15 meters at its narrowest point. Cliffs rose on one side, the sea crashed on the other. An army of millions would have to funnel through in small groups, negating their numerical advantage. Ancient stone walls from previous defensive positions could be quickly rebuilt. The surrounding terrain offered natural defensive positions at 3 separate gates along the pass. But the Spartans' greatest advantage lay not in their weapons or tactics, it was their absolute acceptance of death. Before departing for Thermopylae, Leonidas' wife Gorgo had asked what she should do if he didn't return. His response became legendary: marry a good man and have good children. When a Persian emissary demanded the Spartans surrender their weapons, Leonidas' 2-word reply would echo through history: Molon labe, come and take them. The Spartan equipment reflected centuries of refinement. Their iconic bronze helmets with horsehair crests weren't just for show. The narrow eye slits protected against arrows while maintaining peripheral vision. Their crimson cloaks served a psychological purpose. Making bloodstains invisible, they prevented enemies from seeing which Spartans were wounded. The Aspis shield, weighing nearly 15 pounds, was designed not just for individual protection, but as an integral component of the phalanx. Each man's shield protected the warrior to his left. As news reached Sparta that Xerxes' army had crossed into Europe, King Leonidas made his selection. He chose only fathers of living sons, understanding that their sacrifice would not end their bloodlines. The religious festival of Carneia technically prohibited Sparta from sending its full army, but Leonidas found a loophole. He would take his personal bodyguard of 300 and happen upon additional Greek allies along the way. In August 480 BC, as they prepared to march north, each Spartan warrior participated in the traditional pre-battle ritual. They oiled their bodies, combed their long hair, and checked their equipment one final time. To outside observers, these men seemed to be preparing for a festival rather than certain death, but Spartans had a saying: a beautiful death brings eternal glory. They weren't marching to die, they were marching to become immortal. The Gathering Storm. On the morning of August 17, 480 BC, Greek scouts brought word that changed everything. The Persian vanguard had been spotted near the Malian Gulf, just 2 days' march from Thermopylae. The sea itself seemed to turn dark with Persian ships, Phoenician triremes, Egyptian barges, and Ionian warships stretching across the horizon in formations that took hours to pass. The Spartans had already arrived at the hot gates a week earlier, using the time to prepare the battlefield with meticulous precision. They rebuilt the ancient Phocian wall at the middle gate, the narrowest point of the pass, reinforcing it with stones torn from nearby ruins. Leonidas positioned his forces not at the first gate, but at this middle position, creating a killing ground where they could retreat and reform multiple times. Meanwhile, Greek allies had been trickling in despite the impossible odds. 700 Thespians arrived, refusing to abandon the Spartans even though their city had already voted to evacuate. 400 Thebans came, though some historians suggest they were hostages ensuring Thebes' cooperation. Smaller contingents from Mycenae, Phlius, and other city-states swelled the defensive force to approximately 7,000 men. Yet everyone understood. This was a Spartan operation. The 300 would hold the crucial center position. The Persian army's approach was visible for miles. Dust clouds rose from the marching columns like smoke from a vast fire. Xerxes had deliberately chosen a route that maximized the psychological impact of his force's size. His army took 7 days and nights to cross the Hellespont Bridge. Ancient sources claimed you could drink the rivers dry along their march route. When they finally came into view of the Greek position, the Persians' numbers seemed to defy comprehension. Xerxes established his command post on a hilltop overlooking the pass, sitting on a golden throne where he could observe the battle like watching a theater performance. From this vantage point, he sent his first envoy to the Greeks, a mounted herald bearing the great king's traditional offer: surrender, acknowledge Persian supremacy, and be granted lands far from Greece. Fight and be annihilated. Leonidas's response was theatrical. He invited the Persian envoy to observe the Spartans' preparation ritual: 300 warriors exercising naked, oiling their bodies, and carefully combing their long hair. To the Persian, this seemed like madness, men preparing for a festival, not battle. He reported back to Xerxes that the Greeks must be insane, but Demaratus, an exiled Spartan king serving as Xerxes' advisor, understood the truth. These men are preparing to risk their lives, and they wish to look their best while doing so. For 3 days, Xerxes waited. This too was psychological warfare, giving the Greeks time to contemplate the impossible odds and lose their nerve. Each day, more Persian reinforcements arrived, adding to the spectacle of force arrayed against the pass. At night, Persian campfires stretched for miles, their number said to rival the stars themselves. The Greeks could hear the polyglot babble of dozens of languages, the neighing of thousands of horses, and the constant percussion of hammers as Persian engineers prepared siege equipment. On the 4th day, Xerxes sent a final envoy with a simplified offer: surrender your weapons and leave with your lives. Leonidas's response became one of history's most famous phrases: molon labe, come and take them. As dawn broke on August 20th, 480 BC, the temperature was already rising. Thermopylae means hot gates because of the sulfurous hot springs that bubbled up nearby, filling the air with the smell of brimstone. The Greeks, standing in tight formation behind their rebuilt wall, watched as the Persian army began its deployment. War drums thundered across the plain. Persian officers shouted orders in a dozen languages. The most powerful military force ever assembled in the ancient world, prepared to crush 300 Spartans who refused to move. The morning sun glinted off a sea of bronze and iron stretching to the horizon. The Greeks could see the famed immortals in their distinctive scale armor and felt caps, Persian archers with their powerful composite bows, Median cavalry testing their horses, and Phoenician marines who had sailed around to attack from the sea. Xerxes, from his golden throne, raised his hand. The battle for Western civilization was about to begin. Day of Bronze. The first wave launched at midday, when the August sun had turned the narrow pass into a furnace. Xerxes opened with his Median infantry, expendable troops meant to test Greek defenses and tire them out. 10,000 Medes advanced in loose formation, their wicker shields and shorter spears inadequate for what awaited them. As the Persians approached the rebuilt Phocian wall, the Spartans stood motionless. Their bronze helmets revealed nothing. No eyes, no expressions, just the narrow slits that made them look like bronze statues come to life. Only when the Medes reached 20 paces did Leonidas give the order. The Spartans raised their spears in perfect unison, a forest of bronze that suddenly bristled from behind the wall. Then they charged. The collision was catastrophic for the Persians. Spartan dory spears, 8 feet long, outreached Persian weapons by 3 feet. The Spartans thrust over the wall in synchronized strikes, their decades of training evident in every movement. The Medes' wicker shields shattered against Spartan bronze. Their shorter spears couldn't penetrate the overlapping Aspis shields. Within minutes, the pass was choked with Median dead and wounded. But the Spartans had prepared for more than just holding the wall. They executed a tactical withdrawal, a seemingly simple maneuver that required extraordinary discipline. In perfect formation, they retreated behind the wall, luring overconfident Persians into the killing ground beyond. Then they turned, reformed, and charged again. The confined space of the pass turned into a meat grinder, where Persian numbers meant nothing. The Median commander, seeing his men dying by the hundreds, committed his reserves. Fresh troops poured into the pass, stepping over the bodies of their fallen comrades. But the Spartans never broke formation. When a dory spear shattered, the warrior seamlessly drew his Xiphos sword and continued fighting. When one man fell wounded, his comrades closed ranks immediately, the phalanx never showing a gap. By mid-afternoon, Xerxes had lost perhaps 2,000 men without inflicting a single Spartan casualty. Furious, he committed the Immortals, his elite force that had never tasted defeat. These warriors wore scale armor, carried short spears and bows, and fought with a ferocity that had conquered nations. The Immortals' attack represented the Persian Empire's finest hour. They advanced in disciplined ranks, their armor gleaming, their commanders shouting encouragement in Old Persian. The Greeks could hear the distinctive sound of their composite bows being drawn, a weapon that could pierce armor at ranges where Greek arrows would bounce off. But in the confines of Thermopylae, the Immortals' archery advantage evaporated. Their shorter spears proved useless against Spartan reach. Their lighter armor couldn't withstand the power of Spartan thrusts. Most devastating of all, their individual fighting prowess, honed through years of training, meant nothing against the mechanical precision of the Spartan phalanx. Leonidas demonstrated the tactical genius that made this defense possible. He ordered feigned retreats, a maneuver so difficult that few ancient armies could execute it. The Spartans would appear to break and run, drawing the Immortals forward. Then, at a signal, they would wheel around in perfect formation and charge into the pursuing Persians who had broken their own ranks in the chase. The battle descended into a brutal rhythm: charge, thrust, kill, withdraw, reform, repeat. The pass became so choked with bodies that both sides had to clear corpses just to continue fighting. The Greeks rotated fresh warriors to the front ranks while the wounded pulled back. Persian officers drove their men forward with whips, but courage couldn't overcome the mathematics of the killing ground. As the sun began to set on the first day, Xerxes called off the attack. He had committed perhaps 20,000 men to the pass and suffered staggering casualties. Estimates range from 4,000 to 10,000 killed or wounded. The Greeks had lost perhaps 100 men, mostly allied forces. Not a single Spartan had fallen. That night, the Greeks could hear the Persian camp's sounds of mourning and rage. Xerxes, from his golden throne, had watched his invincible army shatter itself against 300 Spartans. He had witnessed the Immortals, who had conquered Babylon, subdued Egypt, and broken kingdoms, fail to dislodge a handful of Greeks from a narrow pass. The Spartans, meanwhile, tended their wounds, repaired their equipment, and prepared for the next day. They knew Xerxes would return with greater fury. What they couldn't know was that a traitor was already making his way to the Persian camp with information that would doom them all. I'm going to take a quick break here because I'm curious. What do you think of the story so far? If you're enjoying it, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to activate the bell to be notified when the next epic episode like this one comes out. Now, if you've made it this far and are truly immersed in this battle, leave in the comments the phrase Leonidas said when the Persians asked him to lay down his weapons. Molon Labe. This means, come and get them. 2 words that have echoed for 2,500 years. I want to see how many warriors have made it to this point in history. Let's continue. The Immortals fall. Dawn of the second day brought no Persian attack. Xerxes, his pride wounded by the previous day's disaster, spent the morning in war councils with his generals. He couldn't comprehend how 300 Spartans had decimated his best troops. His commanders offered various explanations: Greek terrain advantage, superior equipment, defensive positioning. None dared speak the truth, that Spartan training and discipline simply outmatched Persian numbers. Finally, at midday, Xerxes committed to a strategy of overwhelming mass. If precision couldn't break the Greeks, perhaps sheer weight of numbers would. He ordered wave attacks, continuous assaults that would give the defenders no rest. Fresh Persian units would rotate into the pass every hour, ensuring the Greeks faced constant combat. The second day's battle was even more ferocious than the first. The Persians had learned from their mistakes, bringing tower shields to protect advancing troops and using massed archery to suppress the Greek position before infantry charges. But Leonidas adapted as well. He rotated his allied contingents to the front lines, saving the Spartans for critical moments. The Thespians and Mycenaeans proved their valor, fighting with desperate courage born of hopelessness. Around the third hour, something extraordinary occurred. A mass of Persians broke through the Greek lines, surging past the wall into what they thought was open ground beyond. It was a trap. The Spartans had prepared a secondary killing ground, and as the Persians celebrated their breakthrough, the 300 emerged from defensive positions and systematically slaughtered every man who had passed the wall. This triggered one of ancient warfare's most terrifying spectacles, the Spartan Dance of Death. In perfect synchronization, the 300 moved through the Persian ranks like a bronze machine. 8-foot spears thrust forward, withdrew, thrust again, each movement precisely timed, each strike lethal. The Persians, fighting as individuals or small groups, couldn't coordinate a defense against this mechanical precision. Xerxes, watching from his throne, made a decision that revealed his desperation. He ordered the immortals forward again, but this time with support from his best Median cavalry and siege engineers. This represented a massive commitment. Essentially, his entire elite fighting force concentrated on a pass barely 15 meters wide. The afternoon battle became apocalyptic. Persian engineers brought portable mantlets, mobile barriers meant to protect advancing troops. They collapsed immediately in the narrow pass, creating obstacles for their own side. Cavalry horses, terrified by the close quarters and walls of corpses, refused to advance despite their riders' urgings. The immortals, fighting now with desperation rather than confidence, pressed forward by sheer numbers. It was during this phase that the Spartans demonstrated why they were considered the ancient world's supreme warriors. Multiple sources describe Spartan hoplites continuing to fight even after receiving wounds that would have killed lesser men. One warrior, his spear and sword broken, killed 3 Persians with his bare hands before succumbing to his injuries. Another, blinded by a sword cut across his eyes, fought on by listening to enemy footsteps. Leonidas himself was everywhere, his distinctive crimson cloak making him easily identifiable. He fought not as a king but as a Spartan peer, taking his place in the phalanx front rank and killing with practiced efficiency. Persian commanders specifically targeted him, recognizing that killing the Spartan king might break Greek morale. Multiple assassination attempts failed as Leonidas's personal bodyguard, the best warriors among the 300, intercepted every thrust meant for their king. As sunset approached on the second day, something unprecedented occurred. Persian units began refusing orders to advance into the pass. Whips and threats couldn't compel them to face certain death against the Spartan bronze wall. Xerxes had lost perhaps another 5,000 to 8,000 men. The Greeks had suffered heavier casualties than the first day, maybe 500 killed or wounded, but the Spartans remained intact, a core of 300 warriors who showed no signs of breaking. That night changed everything. As the Greeks tended their wounds and prepared for a third day of battle, a local Greek named Ephialtes entered the Persian camp. He brought information worth more than all of Xerxes' gold. There was a mountain path, the Thermopylae trail, that could outflank the Greek position. For a price, he would guide Persian forces around Thermopylae, trapping the Greeks between 2 armies. Xerxes immediately dispatched Hydarnes, commander of the Immortals, with a force of perhaps 10,000 men to follow Ephialtes through the mountain darkness. By dawn, they would emerge behind the Greek position. The Spartans' extraordinary defense was about to end, not through defeat in battle, but through betrayal. Betrayal and glory. The Phocian guards posted on the mountain path detected the Persian flanking force at dawn of the third day. They sent runners to warn Leonidas, but by then it was too late. Hydarnes and his 10,000 immortals were already descending toward the Greek rear. The trap was sprung. Leonidas faced the moment every Spartan officer trained for, an impossible tactical situation requiring an immediate decision. He could order a fighting retreat, potentially saving his allied forces, but abandoning the pass. Or he could hold position, buying time for the Greek fleet and southern armies to prepare their defenses. The choice revealed everything about Spartan values. He ordered the allies to withdraw immediately. Most obeyed. Approximately 6,000 men marched south in organized retreat, covering the Greek fleet's movements. But the Thespians refused to leave, declaring they would share the Spartans' fate. The Theban contingent stayed as well, though sources suggest Leonidas kept them as hostages. With the 300 Spartans, this final defensive force numbered perhaps 1,500 men, all knowing they would never leave Thermopylae alive. What followed was the most famous last stand in Western history. Leonidas moved his reduced force forward from the defensive wall into the widest part of the pass, a deliberate choice to inflict maximum casualties before death. He understood that the longer they fought, the more time the Greek fleet had to prepare their defense. Every minute his men survived was a minute bought for Greek freedom. The morning's battle was a slaughter unlike the previous 2 days. The Spartans fought not to defend, but to kill as many Persians as possible before falling. They broke their formations, fighting in small groups or pairs, maximizing casualties rather than maintaining defensive strength. When their dory spears shattered, they fought with xiphos swords. When swords broke, they fought with knives. When knives were lost, they fought with their bare hands. Leonidas fell early in this final battle, surrounded by Persian nobility who sought the glory of killing the Spartan king. His death triggered one of ancient warfare's most savage melees. 4 times the Spartans charged into massed Persian ranks to recover their king's body. 4 times they succeeded, though each charge cost dozens of lives. The fighting around Leonidas's corpse became so intense that bodies literally piled higher than a man's head. Around midday, the Persians attacking from the front finally linked up with Hydarnes' flanking force. The remaining Greeks, perhaps 500 at this point, were completely surrounded. They retreated to a small hillock within the pass, forming a circle with their backs together. This was the last position, the final stand. The Spartans who still had weapons fought on. Those who had lost weapons picked up stones and hurled them at the Persians. Xerxes, seeing his opportunity, ordered his archers forward. From all sides, thousands of Persian arrows descended on the hillock. This was how the Spartans finally fell, not broken by sword or spear, but overwhelmed by arrows they couldn't block. The last Spartans died standing, their shields raised, their bodies bristling with arrows like porcupines. An anecdote from this final stand captures the Spartan spirit perfectly. During one of the last lulls in fighting, a Persian officer shouted that Persian arrows were so numerous they would blot out the sun. Leonidas, a Spartan warrior, laughed and replied, "Good, then we'll fight in the shade." These were perhaps his last words before the final arrow barrage. When the Persians finally advanced to count bodies, they found something that stunned them. The Spartans had killed an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 Persian soldiers in this final battle alone. Over 3 days, 300 Spartans and perhaps 1,000 allies had inflicted 20,000 casualties on the Persian Empire's finest troops. The pass was so choked with corpses that Xerxes' engineers needed days to clear a path for the army to continue south. Xerxes, surveying the battlefield, made a decision that revealed his rage and grudging respect. He ordered Leonidas's body found, beheaded, and crucified, a treatment reserved for the worst criminals, unprecedented for an enemy king. But privately, he acknowledged to his generals that he would trade all his victories for having 1,000 men who fought like Spartans. The Persians marched south through Thermopylae, their passage bought with blood. But something had changed. The myth of Persian invincibility was shattered. The Greeks now knew that Persian soldiers, for all their numbers and equipment, could be beaten. And the Persians knew something that would haunt their invasion. If 300 Spartans could inflict such carnage, what would a united Greek army accomplish? Echo through millennia. The immediate aftermath of Thermopylae seemed to confirm Persian victory. Xerxes' army swept south, burning Athens and forcing the Greek fleet to retreat. Yet the 3 days at the hot gates had accomplished everything Leonidas intended. The Persian fleet had been delayed long enough for the Greek navy to prepare defensive positions at Salamis. The southern Greek city-states, inspired by Spartan sacrifice, unified under common command for the first time in their history. 1 month after Thermopylae, the Greeks lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis, essentially replicating Thermopylae's geography at sea. Xerxes, watching from a hilltop throne as he had at the hot gates, witnessed his invincible navy destroyed. The parallels were exact. Superior Persian numbers negated by constricted terrain, Greek forces using disciplined formations, and catastrophic Persian casualties. The ghost of Leonidas seemed to haunt the great king's every decision. The following year at Plataea, the Greeks fielded an army of 100,000 hoplites, the largest Greek force ever assembled. The Spartans, fighting to avenge their fallen king, led a charge that broke the Persian center and killed Mardonius. Xerxes' invasion ended in complete disaster. Of the 150,000 who marched into Greece, fewer than 40,000 returned to Persia. The remaining died to Greek spears, Greek ships and Greek courage inspired by 300 men who chose death over surrender. The cultural impact of Thermopylae transformed Spartan society itself. The battle became the defining moment of Spartan identity, physical proof that their harsh military culture, their brutal agoge system, and their complete dedication to warfare produced the ancient world's supreme warriors. But it also marked the beginning of Sparta's decline. The myth of invincibility created by Leonidas became a cage that prevented Spartan society from adapting to changing warfare. They remained frozen in the moment of their greatest glory, eventually becoming obsolete as Greek military tactics evolved. For Athens and democratic Greece, Thermopylae served a different purpose. The battle demonstrated that free men fighting for their homes would always outperform enslaved soldiers fighting for a distant king. This became a core argument in Greek political philosophy, the superiority of free citizens over Persian subjects. Herodotus, writing a generation later, framed Thermopylae as the clash between liberty and despotism, a narrative that echoes through Western political thought to this day. The Persian Empire never recovered its momentum after Greece. Xerxes, humbled by catastrophic losses, never mounted another major campaign. His obsession with Greek revenge consumed resources that might have stabilized the empire's eastern frontiers. Within 150 years, Alexander the Great would lead a Greek army across the same Hellespont bridge, conquering Persia, with tactics refined from the lessons of Thermopylae. Disciplined heavy infantry could defeat numerically superior forces through tactical positioning and superior morale. Physical monuments to the battle appeared almost immediately. The Greeks erected a stone lion at Thermopylae, along with an inscription attributed to the poet Simonides that became one of antiquity's most famous epitaphs. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." These simple words capture the Spartan ethos perfectly. No boasting about casualties inflicted, no lamentation of fate, just a statement of duty fulfilled. The monument stood for centuries, becoming a pilgrimage site for warriors from across the ancient world, who came to honor men who chose death over dishonor. Modern archaeological excavations have uncovered tangible evidence confirming ancient accounts. Arrowheads of Persian design litter the pass in concentrations, suggesting the massive archery barrages described by Herodotus. Analysis of remains shows trauma patterns consistent with close-quarters spear combat. Geological surveys have identified the likely location of the Phocian Wall and traced the mountain path Ephialtes used for his betrayal. The battle's influence extends far beyond military history. Thermopylae established the glorious last stand as a cultural template copied across civilizations. From the Alamo to Thermopylae analogies in World War II speeches, the image of a small force holding against impossible odds continues to inspire. The phrase Spartan itself became synonymous with austere discipline and courage, a linguistic legacy of 3 days in 480 BC. Perhaps most remarkably, Thermopylae succeeded precisely because it failed tactically. Leonidas and his 300 died, the Persians passed through, and Greece seemed doomed. Yet the strategic victory was complete. Persian momentum broken, Greek unity forged, and the psychological advantage shifted permanently. Xerxes commanded the largest army ever assembled, but he could not command the fear his soldiers now felt when facing Greek hoplites. Today, visitors to Thermopylae find a landscape transformed by time. Millennia of silt deposits have moved the coastline nearly 3 miles north. The sea that once crashed against the pass is now distant farmland. The narrow gateway where 300 held their ground is now a wide valley barely recognizable from ancient descriptions. Yet the spirit of the place remains. Standing where Leonidas made his stand, one can still feel the weight of that decision. To trade certain death for uncertain hope, to sacrifice everything for an idea of freedom that would echo through the ages. The Battle of Thermopylae stands as an eternal testament to a truth that transcends military tactics. Courage, discipline, and absolute commitment to a cause can overcome any material disadvantage. 300 Spartans, facing odds of 500 to 1, proved that the measure of warriors lies not in their numbers but in their spirit. Their sacrifice bought time for democracy to survive, for Western philosophy to flourish, and for an idea to take root that free men fighting for their homes are worth more than empires of slaves. Their epitaph remains as true today as when it was carved in stone 2,500 years ago. Here, obedient to their laws, they lie.